Good morning, good afternoon, wherever we are in this world. Welcome to a special emergency session, Coffee with Dragon, a calling for cordial, harmonious, and peaceful relations between Canada and China and North America, that is, in China. Seems that the political, diplomatic, and of course, financial, business, commercial tensions are escalating as we are in the first month of this year. First month actually about to finish in 3 days. First and foremost, like I said, dedicate this cup of coffee to world peace, specifically for cordial, harmonious, and friendly relations between Sino-Canadian, Sino-North American, and Sino-world relations for that matter. Sino as in China, specifically China, the People's Republic of China, not Taiwan, since of course Taiwan is official name is the Republic of China, and China mainland, what's known as mainland China, the People's Republic of China. Of course, that's another issue of contention, a hard issue diplomatically, and we have to go back historically, which I did in one of my cup of coffees in order to understand the current situation. We have to go back to the 1920s, late 20s, 30s, and 40s, and of course to Mao Zedong's defeat of Chiang Kai-shek, and to understand the context. That's not the topic of discussion for today, although it intersects, of course, as all our lives in quest for a better world peace, internal, of course, harmony of myself in seeking financial healing, recovery, and security. Coffee with Dragon dedicated to peaceful, harmonious, and cordial Canadian Chinese relations, North American Chinese relations, and world for that matter. It's going to be reading session, reading cup of coffee. Was doing some research, was studying last night, was reading up on, of course, Huawei a little bit. It's of course big in the news. December 1st, 2018. If you don't know, if you're listening to this, Chinese national Meng Huawei was the CEO, financial CEO, that is the chief, not the CEO, the CFO, the chief financial officer of Huawei. Canada, Canadians, myself of course included, a world LGBTQ citizen, but of course a citizen of Canada, North American, and a world citizen. Of course desires peace, harmony, and cordiality with China. Now, the Huawei situation, of course, December 1st, she was arrested by the RCMP, which are the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which is our federal police, sort of like the FBI, honoring an extradition treaty that we have, of course, with the United States. From my understanding, she's been indicted to appear in court in New York on an Iran affair, dealing with Iran in contravention or the sanctions imposed, economic, financial, diplomatic sanctions imposed on Iranian regime by the United States of America. I was just reading a comment actually that inspired me to make that this video for education, for learning, was um, very harsh, very almost biblical comment. Well, the first phrase of this comment on an article was um, down to earth, with financial matters, with commercial, but he ended the commentary with something very, very biblical about that. Maybe I have to make this video as a world citizen, Canadian, who desires peace, world peace, prosperity, worldwide, international security. So I'm gonna Google and am going to go in an article from Wikipedia. Of course, most of it is source, and we'll begin reading while having some coffee. So you can just maybe close your eyes if you're tired, have a coffee, or just meditate. I'm going to be reading. I'm an aspiring reader, lecturer in English and in other languages. This one, of course, is going to be in English. My resolution is continuing of learning Chinese, that is Mandarin. It's a struggle, have to admit, but I've started a few words. Ni hao, shi shi ne, wa gao. So that's my resolution for 2019 New Year's resolution. Still got more than 11 months to go. So, economy of China. I'm going to be reading on this Coffee with Dragon for myself, my own education, to learning to acquire more wisdom, understanding, and knowledge of our world. China is, of course, the second biggest economy in the world. And just to mention, I've mentioned this in my previous lectures. This is going to be, of course, included in my Canadian Citizens Finance, since, of course, we're related now to our financial integration that is also commercial by finance. In this context, I mean the commercial dealings, the business dealings, the import, the export, and the foreign direct investment. So this will be focused. We'll be reading from Wikipedia with commentary. But before I'm going to proceed, I want to state that, like I've stated in other lectures, other discussions, conversations, this Coffee with Dragons, be a conversation. That's why I'm asking for feedback. I'm asking for topics, for you to give me topics to read or to discuss, to analyze, meditate upon, drink coffee, chat about. That it's a paradox, if you want, use this word paradox, of that since 1984 China has risen to become the second biggest economy in the world today. And it was valid, of course, last year when the whole Canada Huawei deal, diplomatic, that spawned the diplomatic crisis, between Canada and China at the moment. The trade war, of course, trade war that started at the beginning of 2018, that through tariffs, economic tariffs, which Trump and his administration imposed, and then became into a trade war with China, of course, retaliating. That, of course, China has risen to become the second biggest economy in the world. And the world economy since 1984 has integrated commercially, financially, right, in trade, more and more. You have different organizations, regional treaties, free trade agreements. I have to say that me, myself, as a world citizen, Adrian h.a.dragan, am for not only free but also fair trade. Fair as much as we can. So the paradox that we have today, January 29th, 2019, is that this trade war between the biggest market, that is the United States, the biggest importer and thus the biggest buyer of goods, and on the other hand, China, the biggest exporter, producer, and seller of goods, right? And then you have the rest, some of them very big players, of course, Germany, Deutschland, Japan, India, of course, Canada, Russia, Italy, United Kingdom, Nigeria, Brazil, Mexico. Korea, South Korea, major other players in the world economy, which has integrated since 1994, financially, commercially, and trade-wise. This paradox today is that the biggest seller, China, and the biggest buyer, United States, are a trade war that's affecting world markets and the world economy. Think of it as the sun and the moon, if you want. Not that that analogy is, the best, but think of it like that, of the solar system, right? Our system. So you got sun and the moon. Maybe not the best analogy, but nonetheless, the important point in this paradox is that finance. When we discuss finance, and we have esoteric imaginations, and certainly can be very complex. Most people are scared. It's unapproachable. It's so complex. It's equations, alien equations, and mathematics, arithmetics that are so complex and so unreachable only by people in people's imagination when we say finance, financial, finances. Right? When we say, we imagine, we get scared, we get triggered in many ways. But as complex and rich and diverse as the universe of finance is, with its constellations, stars, and systems, which are the banks, the central banks, the corporations, the different currencies of the world, as complex as it can seem, when we go to the core, to the essence, what is finance all about, is really about this global financial markets, or equations and bonds and stocks and futures contracts and CDOs. Of course, CDOs, hopefully not, no more of those. That caused the part of the financial crisis, which began July 2007, end of July 2007. But nonetheless, the core, the essence, is about buying and selling. And there we stripped thick books. Should say finance, and oh my goodness. When we strip all that, those layers and layers and layers, finance is ultimately about buying and selling. And in the world economy today, dominated by the biggest buyer, and by extension, the biggest market, the biggest consumer, interlocking horns in a trade war with the biggest seller, exporter and producer, because they go together, right? So the paradox of this, it's affecting all the markets. It's worldwide. Since 1984, China has risen to become the biggest seller, exporter, producer of goods. The United States, of course, biggest buyer. So finance, buying and selling. Get the paradox of where we are today in the world. Anyways, Coffee with Dragon. I'm going to proceed with reading. Economy of China. This article is about the economy of People's Republic of China. This is, of course, public information. You can find it by Googling it. For the economy of Republic of China, see economy of Taiwan. The socialist market economy of the People's Republic of China is the world's second largest economy by nominal GDP and the world's largest economy by purchasing parity. Until 2015, China was the world's fastest growing major economy, with growth rates averaging 10% over 30 years. Averaging, this is an average. So it might have been 13 in 1 year, it might have been 7 on the other, it might have been 7.7 in one, it might have been 11 on the other, it might have been 12 and then 8, averaging over 30 years 10%. Due to historical and political facts of China's developing economy, China's public sector accounts for a bigger share of the national economy than the burgeoning private sector. Historical, of course. is, of course, the policies of Mao Zedong, socialization, nationalization. According to the IMF, that is, the IMF stands for International Monetary Fund, on a per capita income basis, China ranked 71st by GDP nominal and 78th by GDP per capita in 2016. Of course, you have to take into consideration per capita, that is per person. Of course, it's going to be lower because of the tremendous, China's the most populated nation, state on Earth, on the planet, right? China. The country has an estimated 23 trillion worth of natural resources. So in these natural resources, find things such as coal, minerals, oil, 90% of which are coal and rare earth metals, such as aluminum, steel, zinc, copper, gold. China also has the world's largest total banking sector assets of 39.9 trillion. That is 252 trillion CNY. That is the currency of China. CNY. With 26.54 US dollar trillion in US dollars in total deposits. China also has the world's largest total banking sector assets. It's important because you see there's a bit of financial jargon here. Exactly, these assets are defined. We're gonna have to be another cup of coffee, more coffee next time too, if we're to do really more in depth to look at the banking sector assets and the banking in China, just on that specific. This being the economy, it's more general. World's largest total banking sector assets of 39.9 trillion, with 26.54 trillion in total deposits. Shanghai is the financial center of China. The currency is the renminbi yuan. So a renminbi yuan equals 14 cents, 14 and a half US dollar cents. Fiscal year or calendar year. They're part of the World Trade Organization, APEC, Asian Pacific Economic Council, G20, and many others. Statistics. The GDP, and this is nominal in 2018, an estimate. This is an estimation. 13.457 trillion. Now I need to remind that a trillion is 1,000 billion, since a billion is 1,000 million. A million has 6 zeros, a billion has 9 zeros, and 1 trillion is 1 followed by 12 zeros. Just because when we speak in trillions, there's no trillionaire in the world. It's at this macro level. In fact, Apple has just reached up and down. It was last year 1 point has reached a trillion. Was the first company. Besides one that is not so well known, of course, this is their assets. What's called in finance AUM, assets under management, and this is BlackRock, which was founded in the 80s, which not so many people know unless you're in finance. But in trillions is assets under management is BlackRock. BlackRock is gonna need to drink lots of coffee just to discuss BlackRock. Okay. The PPP was estimated at 25.313 trillion. The GDP ranked second in nominal and first. It ranked first in PPP, that is purchasing power parity, That is the purchasing power of the aggregate economic power, if you want, the economic production level. GDP growth in 2017 was 6.9%. And interestingly enough, the beginning of last week, it was in the news a lot that for the first year in last year, 2018's growth of China was the lowest since 1991. That's in about lowest in 27 years or so, 28 years. Now, of course, per capita, the GDP is 71st, the 78 per purchasing power parity. The sector breakdown, the GDP per sector. Agriculture accounts for 8.6% of the gross domestic product. Industry accounts for 39.8% in industry. Services accounts for 51.6%. 51.6%. This is 2016, and this are World Bank, IMF data. So this is all public data. This is what data from the IMF, from the World Bank. You can, of course, double check from what the IMF and World Bank. And one thing to know is that, of course, real data and official data, that's another cup of coffee. But nonetheless, World Bank and IMF. Inflation is 2.1% in March 2018, according to the, again, World Bank, IMF. The Gini coefficient is 40 in 2018. Human Development Index, this is the United Nations standard, how they develop. It's by the United Nations, 0.752, 17th in 2017, and it was 86th in the world. Labor force. The labor force in China is 803 million people. This is the first in 2017, first biggest labor force in the world. Labor force by occupation. Agriculture is 29.5%. It's close to 30, close to a third. Industry is 29.9%, again close to a third. Services is 40.6 in 2014. Keep in mind 2014, so although these numbers might have shifted a bit, my suspicion is not by more than 5%. Perhaps services has gone up in 4 years, in 3.5 years. But the percentage gap is somewhere in the percentages, not tens of percentage. So unemployment 3.97% in the first quarter of 2017. The main industries: mining, ore processing, iron, steel, aluminum, and other metals, coal, machine building, armaments, textiles, apparel, petroleum, cement, chemicals, fertilizer, food processing, transportation equipment, automobiles, rail cars, locomotives, ships, aircraft, telecommunications equipment. And of course, this is Huawei's. Huawei actually is the biggest telecommunications equipment maker, and this includes gadgets for the cell phone towers, the infrastructure of cell phone towers, and the internet telecommunication infrastructure, such as cable and supposedly the biggest in the world, well, in terms of making the equipment. Space launch vehicles, satellites, consumer products, including footwear, toys, electronics. This is an interesting rate here. It's ease of doing business rank. And this was actually done in 2017 by an organization an organization. You can check the website. It's called Doing Business. This is January 2017, so 2 years ago. It was ranked 46th, so not that high, right? You would think that China, since it's the second biggest economy, or at least top 10. It's ranked 46th ease of doing business. Now, ease of doing business, and here would have to discern and ask more questions. What exactly? Ease of doing business internally or domestically, somebody who wants to go, let's say a Canadian from Canada, United States, from Germany, from Israel, he wants to go set up, do business in China. Is there more bureaucratic red tape for foreign direct investment, that is for foreign capital, money, business? Because that, of course, has to be discerned. External exports. US 2.49 trillion 2018. 2.49 trillion in 2018. Again, remind everybody that a trillion is 1,000 billion, a billion is 1,000 million, 1 trillion has 12 zeros. So the exports in 2018 were uh, huge. This is given by national data. So 2,490 billion. That is a lot of export in trillion in 2018. 2.49 trillion. That is 2,490 million millions. Higher than number. So trillion, of course, the macro level. Export goods. The goods are, in terms of percentage, agricultural products 3.2%, fuels and mining products 2.4%, and this is a staggering number for exports. 94.3% in manufacturers. So manufacturing goods, clothes, apparel, you name it, gadget, toys, all of that. That's manufacturing. Laptops. Yep, this cup is made in China. Yep, made in China, this cup. Item number 99647W, whatever. But this cup is made in China. So I'm drinking coffee with Dragon. Coffee is not, of course, in China, but it's from Sumatra and Colombia. But the cup that I'm drinking coffee is, in fact, made in China. The taste of the coffee, brothers and sisters, supporters, allies, has not changed after me reading that it's a cup made in China. We proceed. Main export partners. United States is the main export partner in terms of percentage of export. The United States accounts for 18.3% of China's total exports. That's close to one fifth, right, Tony? 18.3% of the total amount of goods that agriculture services is mostly manufacturers, clothes, apparel, electronics, like this cup. It's mostly that. European Union comes after with 16.1%. Hong Kong, amazingly, it's 13.8%. Japan is 6.1%. South Korea is 4.5%. And others is 41.2%. Others could be, of course, well, because European Union is 16.1%, others meaning all the other countries that are not part of the European Union, which of course has many countries. Today it stands, of course, at 28 countries, if I'm not mistaken, but do believe that it's 28 nation states that are part of the European Union. Others, 41.2%, includes my own country, of course, of Canada. It could be, of course, other countries like Mexico, Nigeria, Egypt, Israel. imports. So it also imported a lot in 2018. It imported $2.14 trillion of goods and services. That is another big. Again, how accurate these numbers are. But the exports are 2.49 trillion and the imports are 2.14 trillion. So the differential would be we just have to cancels out the 2 trillion and it's 0.49 and 0.14. So, and this is in trillions, of course, this is lots of billions, but it comes down to 490 billion and 140 billion. So the differential is 350 billion exported more. Again, numbers of 2018. 2018. Of course, it exported more by some would say a lot. Some would say since it's the imports and the exports are so big in terms of the percentage of the total import and export, it's not that big in terms of if we break it down into percentages, meaning how much more in terms of the value in US dollars did they export versus how much more did they import. If we break it down, of course, in percentage, it's not double and it's not triple and it's not that. It's actually close to only about a differential of, if I do this math quickly, is barely a quarter, even less, 20%, even less than a quarter more, even less, 20%, even 15%. About we could. I'm not gonna do the math now. It's feasible, very feasible. But off the top of my head, it's not that. Since the numbers are so big together, but the actual in billions is a big number. It's 350 billion. So it is still an important in terms of the value. They exported way more in terms of net U.S. capital value than they imported. Import goods, the agricultural products account for 9.5% of the imported goods in China. So what China imports from other countries such as Canada, United States, Mexico, fuels and mining products, 21.3%. The big number. Manufacturers 64.4%, others 4.8%. Main import partners, and here's where we could see the contention, of course, with the trade war, where this is significant here. The main import partners of China, that is, where does China buy its goods, services from the most? Number one is the European Union with 13.1%. In second place is South Korea with 10%. Third place is Japan with 9.2%. Fourth place is Taiwan. Interestingly enough, it imports from Taiwan and more than it import at least in these numbers in 2018. In terms of net US dollars, Taiwan 8.8%. And of course, keep in mind that China does not recognize Taiwan's independence officially, and it actually stated that Taiwan is a rogue state. There's another paradox here. But they imported a lot of goods from Taiwan. 8.8% of the total imports came from Taiwan. And of course, it doesn't balance in their export to Taiwan. And the United States comes in fifth place, 8.5%. But the United States is the biggest importer of Chinese goods. That is, China exports number one to the United States, and it comes to when it comes to buying goods from where United States is in the fifth place. So you can see why there's a contention and a claim that there's an imbalance, and there certainly is a trade deficit. but of course that can be discerned how, what exactly, and what. A trade deficit means that there's the balance, financial balance or commercial balance, business balance doesn't balance out, and that one country, one entity, one corporation imports or sells more to the other than the other does. Usually, we say a trade deficit when there's a big percentage. If it's usually we don't say there's a trade deficit if it's a few $1,000s in the at the macro level. If it's in the millions and billions, such is the case here, of course, it's in the billions. A billion is 1,000 million once again, so there is a trade deficit. Others 50.4%. FDI stock. This is 2016. FDI stands for foreign direct investment and is 1.354 trillion. And that's 354 billion. 1,354,000,000,000 because 1 trillion is 1,000 billion. Gross external debt. It's on the 31st of March 2017. And this is another point that economists and financial analysts have said that it's a problem now in China because of personal indebtedness and both public and private debt. And thus, after you indebt yourself, after a few years, let's say for 3.5 years, you indebted yourself, then you can buy less because you have to serve interest and you have other obligations to service your debt. So your spending power capability, if you want, goes down. There's an inverse relationship, what's called in economics. So that's another factor that economists have been warning about that is internally affecting China. Their public and private debt has been growing in the past years a lot. Public finances in the economy of China. Public debt, 16.1% of GDP. This is the estimations of 2016. And this was from the public debt of the Central Intelligence Agency. CIA has something called the CIA Fact Book, which is public information which tracks and analyzes internal economic, financial, commercial factors such as the debt. And that's from the website of the CIA, actually. This public information. You can, of course, check it out yourself. Revenues in 2018 are 2.94 trillion. Expenses in 2018, this is again estimate, are 3.46 trillion. So you see there's a big difference there. More than 500 billion, of course, between revenues and expenses. The credit rating, of course, these are Standard and Poor's, A plus in the domestic, A plus in the foreign, A plus in TC assessment. Outlook is stable. Moody's A1, and I'm not going to go into that. Moody's A1, Outlook stable. Fitch A plus, Outlook stable. Scope A plus, Outlook negative is the only one that's given by Scope to China. Foreign reserves. The foreign reserves in January 2018. China foreign reserve post trade gain as yuan rises. This was 7th of February 2018 information. So it has fluctuated a bit, not probably by much. This is again, we can look it up to see about the estimations for this year, which will probably come by the end in a few days. The foreign reserve information, it was at 3.16 trillion, considerably high. Actually, considerably high. Foreign reserves is basically what foreign reserve means is when a country, nation states, the central bank and other banking institutions, well, usually it's pretty much to the central bank of a country, like in the Bank of China, and it's the foreign reserve is the how much money of another the country they have. It's foreign, meaning another country, and reserves in the currency. So in US dollars, they have 3.16 trillion. Keeping in mind that 1 trillion is 1,000 billion A billion is 1,000 million. It is it is holding a considerable amount of foreign reserves. This, of course, because it's such a big exporter and such a big market in the import-export. China, of course, more export and import. Import has grown also. China imports more than it used to, of course. It has started to in the last decade since the financial crisis to import more and more, and and 3.16 trillion. This is the main data is from CIA World Factbook. China is the world's largest. Let me pour myself a little bit of coffee. What do you think? What other questions are you have? Are you a scholar on China? I want to hear from you. Are you a concerned citizen about what is happening with the whole China situation? What do you think is going to happen next in the coming days, hours, weeks ahead? It's, you know, what do you think? And main question, what would be the solutions? What are the solutions to the current turmoil, quagmire, and stress? China is the world's largest manufacturing economy and exporter of goods. China is the world's largest manufacturing economy and exporter of goods. I said at the beginning. Exporter, importer, buyer, seller, producer, market. China is the world's largest manufacturing economy and exporter of goods. It is also the world's fastest growing, paradoxically enough, consumer market and second largest importer of goods. So it has also check this thought out. This is a Draganism 101 here live. This cup as it is made in China. Well, just imagine where it was manufactured. China is very big, it's the most populous nation. Could have been in Shanghai, could have been in Guangzhou, could have been in Beijing, right? Could have been in so many big cities or a small city. Cups, you know, this cup. I wonder when was it produced? When was it shipped? On which ship it was put? Traveled the ocean to reach Montreal, Hawk Island, and now Dragan is drinking from it. And that person who partook to build this, either the owner of the company or the actual supervisor who supervised, and I wonder how it was actually produced, this cup. Was it a big assembly line like factory? Was it somebody who had to personally put a touch on it, a personal touch on it, the worker level, I mean, the labor involved? From which mountain or valley of China did the material come from? Is it porcelain? How many did the manufacturers send to Canada, Quebec, Montreal, Canada? I know this was had a university logo on it. Actually, a Montreal University, Concordia, were made for Concordia specifically. I'm wondering the financial arrangement. How was it made specifically? Was it a cup? Was it just white? And then they put put the stickers, the Concordia Student Union, they put the stickers in university and they put the stickers on the cup, maybe. Dragonisms. Coffee with Dragon, Dragonism is yours truly, my Adrian h.a.dragan's digressions, thoughts, and meditations upon things such as this made in China coffee cup. It is also the world's fastest growing consumer market and second largest importer of goods. China is a net importer of services products. It is the largest trading nation in the world and plays a prominent role in international trade and has increasingly engaged in trade organizations and treaties in recent years. China became a member of the World Trade Organization in 2001. This is note 37 here. It comes actually from the World Trade Organization website. So 2001. Note 37. World Trade Organization. Note 37. It also has free trade agreements with several nations, including ASEAN, that stands for ASEAN. ASEAN is an Asian free trade area agreement. Australia, New Zealand, Pakistan, South Korea, and Switzerland. The provinces in the coastal regions of China tend to be more industrialized, while regions in the hinterland are less developed. As China's economic importance has grown, so has attention to the structure and health of the economy. To avoid the long term socio-economic cost of environmental pollution in China, it has been suggested by Nicholas Stern and Fergus Green of the Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change and the Environment that the economy of China be shifted to more advanced industrial development with low carbon dioxide emissions and better allocation of national resources to innovation and R&D, research and development for sustainable economic growth in order to reduce the impact of China's heavy industry. Sure. This is in accord with the planning goals of the central government. Xi Jinping, pardon if I'm mispronouncing it, it's not on purpose. Xi Jinping is the chairman, of course, of China. Xi Jinping's Chinese dream is described as achieving the two 100s, namely the material goal of China becoming a moderately well-off society by 2021, the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party, and the modernization goal of China becoming a fully developed nation by 2049. The 100th anniversary of the founding of the Republic, the 100th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic. The internationalization. The internationalization of the Chinese economy continues to affect the standardized economic forecast officially launched in China by the Purchasing Managers Index in 2005. As China's economy grows, so does China's renminbi. Renminbi is the currency. called also the renminbi, the yuan, which undergoes the process needed for its internationalization. China's initiated China initiated the founding of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank in 2015. The economic development of Shenzhen is dubbed as the next Valley in the world. I was actually going to watch this later. It's a Bloomberg piece. It's about 11 minutes. Exactly on Shenzhen is dubbed the next Silicon Valley in the world. Silicon Valley, of course, refers to the area in California near San Francisco, where, of course, a lot of the tech firms have headquarters and from where they have grown. The tech, internet, telecommunications hub development, research and development of the world. So Shenzhen is dubbed as the next Silicon Valley in the world. In recent years, government claimed that growth numbers have come under increased scrutiny, with both native and foreign financial and economic observers, as well as Chinese government officials, claiming that the government has been overstating its economic output. Examples include the provincial government in Liaoning publicly admitting that the government had been overstating GDP by 20% when publishing its economic data from 2011 to 2014. Is that something? This is certainly to discern and how much is true. What do we know? But overstating the GDP by 20%, that's a fifth, that's a big, it's not 2% here. It would be certainly problematic concern. Tianjin's trillion yuan GDP claim for 2016 was in fact a third lower at 665 billion yuan. 666 660 666 billion 665 billion yuan. 103 yuan is the currency of China. Yuan at 103 billion. That is a third lower. That's another. Some analysts believe China's official figures for GDP growth are inflated by at least 50%. Don't be inflated. This is, I'm just laughing because sounds like inflated, and it made me think of you know what it made me think of when I heard inflated, of I've been working out. If you know, check some of my past videos. Of course, I have my workout videos, part of the World Citizen Gym Initiative, and of course I'm doing the general integrated workout, my own creation and development. Have lost, of course, more than 56 pounds today, January 29th, 2019, in less than a year. It's gonna be a year in 13 days or so. But inflated made me think of somebody who wants to bulk up, and what he does is just with very low weights, right? And he does that for a few months. They're low weights, so he just pumps, and he's just inflating. He looks just to look, but there's no strength, there's no power, there's no force, right? There's no strength. It's just inflated. So that's why I'm always laughing. It made me think of that. So that's not a draganism there. But this is serious because some analysts believe China's official figures for GDP growth are inflated by at least 50%. 50%, at least 50%. That would be half. That would be. There's reason for inquiry here. How so? Why would some analysts believe that? How come? What do we know? How can we find out? Discern. But anyway, some analysts believe China's official figures for GDP growth are inflated by at least 50%. A Wall Street Journal survey of 64 Selected economists found that 96% of respondents think China's GDP estimates do not accurately reflect the state of the Chinese economy. That's a big Wall Street Journal survey 64 select economists. But see here, see, what does it mean? 64 select economists. That's what's written. I'm not kidding. What does it mean? 64 select economists. Dragan, Adrian, H.a.dragan. I'm a select economist. Sure. Independent economic theorist. But select seems like a word that Wall Street Journal survey of 64 select SELECT economists found that 96% of respondents think China's GDP estimates do not accurately reflect the state of the Chinese economy. However, a paper by the National Bureau of Economic Research in 2017 argued in the opposite direction. Regarding the credibility of official data, China's premier, then party secretary of Liaoning province, has been quoted as saying the GDP numbers are man-made and unreliable and should be used for reference only. Regional economies. So China's unequal transportation system, combined with important differences in the availability of natural and human resources and industrial infrastructure, has produced significant variations in the regional economies of China. Economic development has generally been more rapid in coastal provinces than in the interior, and there are large disparities in per capita income between regions. The three wealthiest regions are along the southeast coast, centered on the Pearl River Delta, along the east coast, centered on the lower Yangtze River, and near the Bohai Gulf in the Beijing-Tianjin region. It is the rapid development of these areas that is expected to have the most significant effect on the Asian regional economy as a whole, and Chinese government policies designed to remove the obstacles to accelerate growth in these wealthier regions. GDP by administrative division. There are 33 administrative divisions in China. Below are the top administrative divisions in China ranked by GDP in 2017. As GDP was converted from CNY to USD using a FX rate of 6.7518 CNY USD. The top 10 provinces by 2017 GDP. China. Guangdong ranked number 1 in nominal US, and of course this is in billions. I'm not going to go with the billions, the numbers, but I'm going to go in billions. That is GDP in billions. Nominal. I'm just going to say the nominal. Guangdong. 1,331, Jiangsu 1,272, Shandong 1,076, Zhejiang 766, Henan 666.31. No, I'm not making this up. This is what it's. See? It's there, see? Henan. Henan, and then Sichuan, Hubei, Hebei, Hunan, Fujian, Hong Kong, and Macau. In accordance with the one country, two systems policy, the economies of the former British colony of Hong Kong and Portuguese colony of Macau are separate from the rest of China and each other. Both Hong Kong and Macau are free to conduct and engage in economic negotiations with foreign countries, as well as participating as full members in various international economic organizations such as the World Customs Organization, the World Trade Organization, and the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, often under the names Hong Kong, China, and Macau, China. The economic reforms implemented in 1979 helped to propel China into the ranks of the world's major economic powers. We're going to take a 3-minute pause in order to put laundry. Just heard the machine that it stopped, so I'm going to be a good citizen and place the laundry where it needs to be to dry. Laundry placing time 3 minutes, maybe 3.5. Yep. All right. The economic reforms implemented in 1979 helped to propel China into the ranks of the world's major economic powers. China shows a great development potential from its remarkable economic growth rate in these years. To guide economic development, the Chinese central government adopts 5-year plans that detail its economic priorities and essential policies. The 13th 5-year plan, 2016-2020, is currently being implemented. The 13th 5-year plan. Like Japan and South Korea before it, China has grown steadily, raising the income levels and living standards of its citizens while producing goods that are consumed globally. Between 1978 and 2005, China's per GDP per capita GDP grew from 153 to 1284. Its current account surplus increased more than 12-fold between 1982 and 2004, from 5.7 billion to 71 billion. During this time, China also became an industrial powerhouse, moving beyond initial successes in low-wage sectors like clothing and footwear to the increasingly sophisticated production of computers, pharmaceuticals, and automobiles. However, it remains unclear how long the Chinese economy can maintain this trajectory. According to the 11th 5-year plan, China needed to sustain an annual growth rate of 8% for the foreseeable future. Only, only with such levels of growth, the leadership argued, could China continue to develop its industrial prowess, raise its citizens' standard of living, and redress the inequalities that were cropping up across the country. Yet, no country has no country had ever before maintained the kind of growth that China was predicting. Moreover, China had to some extent already undergone the easier parts of development. In the 1980s, it had transformed its vast and inefficient agricultural sector, freeing its peasants from the confines of central planning and winning them to the cause of reform. In the 1990s, it had likewise started to restructure its stagnant industrial sector, wooing foreign investors for the first time. These policies had crystallized the country's phenomenal growth. Instead, China had to take what many regarded as the final step toward the market, liberalizing the banking sector and launching the beginnings of a real capital market. According to an article in Journal of the Asia Pacific Economy by Meet Ferdan of University of Greenwich Business School and Abdul Jalil from Wuhan University in China, financial development leads to a reduction in the income inequality in China. The process, however, would not be easy. As of 2004, China's state-owned enterprises were still only partially reorganized, and its banks were dealing with the burden of over 205 billion, that is 1.7 trillion RMB, in non-performing loans, monies that had little chance of ever being repaid. The country had a floating exchange rate and strict controls on both the current and capital accounts. In mid 2014, China announced it was taking steps to boost the economy, which at the time was running at a rate 7.4 per annum, but was slowing. The measures included plans to build a multi-tier transport network comprising railways, roads, and airports to create a new economic belt alongside the Yangtze River. Issues with overclaiming. Chinese provinces and cities have long been suspected of cooking up numbers. Cooking up numbers. Sounds almost like a rap song. Cooking up numbers. Of cooking up numbers. With the focus on local government officials whose performance are often assessed based on how well their respective economies have performed. In recent years, China claimed growth numbers have come under increased scrutiny, with both non-Chinese financial and economic observers as well as Chinese government officials claiming the government has been inflating its economic output. Instances of overclaiming officially came to light when Binai new area in the northern Chinese city of Tianjin. Tianjin's trillion yuan GDP claim for 2016 was in fact a third lower at 666 billion yuan, $103 billion. Inner Mongolia's government also stated that about 40% of the region's reported industrial output in 2016, as well as 26% of reported fiscal revenues, did not exist. The provincial government in Liaoning publicly admitted that the government has been cooking the books. Cooking the books. When publishing its economic data from 2011 to 2014. Liaoning, frequently called China's Rust Belt, admitted in 2017 that local GDP numbers from 2011 to 2014 had been inflated artificially by about 20%. It's about a fifth. Cooking the books. Regarding the credibility, a team of Bloomberg economists wrote, "We don't have total confidence in the numbers, and we are surprised by the acceleration in services output given the collapse in the equity market." A Wall Street Journal survey of 64 select economists, again, this is the same that we read before, 64 select economists found that 96% of respondents think China's GDP estimates don't accurately reflect the state of the Chinese economy. According to some analysts, Chinese officials likely overstate GDP by about 2 to 3 percentage points. China's own premier has previously said he is far from confident in the country's GDP estimates, calling them man-made and unreliable, according to a leaked document from 2007 obtained by WikiLeaks. He said government data releases, especially the GDP numbers, should be used for reference only. Analyst Gary Schilling suggests that China's official figures are off by as much as 50%. He estimates an actual growth rate of 3.5% rather than 7%. Other analysts like Wilbur Ross and Donald Strassheim agree with this assessment and estimate a growth rate at around 4% or less. Donald Strassheim even went as far to say that growth rates in what he describes as old China are as low as 0%, while explaining that the new China of services and consumer spending is tough to measure in the absence of robust data from the private sector. Regional development. Rise of central China, revitalize northeast China, China Western development. These strategies are aimed at the relatively poor region in China in an attempt to prevent widening inequalities. China Western Development, designed to increase the economic situation of the western provinces through capital investment and development of natural resources. Revitalize Northeast China to rejuvenate the industrial bases in Northeast China. It covers the three provinces of Heilongjiang, Jilin, and Liaoning, as well as the five eastern prefectures of Inner Mongolia. Rise of Central China planned to accelerate the development of its central regions. It covers six provinces: Jiangxi, Henan, Anhui, Hubei, Hunan, and Jiangxi. Third Front focused on the southwestern provinces. Foreign investment abroad, go global, to encourage its enterprises to invest overseas. Key national projects. Key national projects: the west to east electricity transmission, the west to east gas transmission, and the south-north water transfer project are the government's three key strategic projects aimed at realigning overall of 12 billion CUM per year. That's the capacity. Construction of the south to north water diversion project was officially launched on 27 December 2002, and completion of phase 1 is scheduled for 2010. This will relieve serious water shortfall in northern China and realize a national distribution of the water resources of the Yangtze, Heilongjiang, and Haihe river valleys. Macroeconomic trends. In January 1985, the State Council of China approved us to establish a SNA, System of National Accounting, used the gross domestic product to measure the national economy. China started the study of theoretical foundation, guiding an accounting model, and so on, for establishing a new system of national economic accounting. In 1986, as the first citizen of the People's Republic of China to receive a PhD, a doctorate in economics from an overseas country, Dr. Feng Bozhang headed Chinese macroeconomic research. The key research project of the seventh five-year plan of China, as well as completing and publishing the China GDP data by China's own research. The summary of the above has been included in the book Chinese Macroeconomic Structure and Policy, 1988. Editor Van Bozhang, collectively authored by the Research Center of the State Council of China. This is the first GDP data published by China. The State Council of China issued the notice regarding implementation of System of National Accounting in August 1992. The SNA system officially is introduced to China, replaced Soviet Union's MPS system. Western Economic Indicator GDP became China's most important economic indicator. The table below shows the trend of the GDP of China at market prices estimated by the International Monetary Fund, with figures in millions Chinese yuan. GDP in billions. I'm going to be reading in US dollars from 2017 to 1990. So in US dollars, this is in billions. In billions, the numbers here. 2017, 12,250.39. 2016, 11,194.69. 2015, 11,063.07. 2014, 10,483.40. 2013, 9,611.26. 2012, 8,560.28. 2011, 7,575.72. 2010, 6,101.30. 2004, and then we jumped to 2005. 5 year plans, remember? 2000, 2286.69, 2000 1211.35, and then 10 years, 1990 394.57. Systemic issues and environment. Over the years, large subsidies were built into the price structure of certain commodities, and these subsidies grew substantially in the late 1970s and 1980s. By 2010, by 2010, rapidly rising wages and a general increase in the standard of living had put increased energy use on a collision course with the need to reduce carbon emissions in order to control global warming. There were diligent efforts to increase energy efficiency and increase use of renewable sources. Over 1,000 inefficient power plants have been closed, but projections continue to show a dramatic rise in carbon emissions from burning fossil fuels. National debt. The International Monetary Fund, the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, and other sources such as the Article for Consultation reports state that at the end of 2014, the general government gross debt to GDP ratio for China was 41.44%, with China's 2014 GDP being 10,356.508 billion. This makes the government debt of China approximately 4.3 United States dollar 4.3 trillion in United States dollars. By the mid 2010s, many analysts have expressed concern over the overall size of the Chinese government debt. A 2015 International Monetary Fund report concluded that China's public debt is relatively low and on a stable path in all standard stress tests except for the scenario with contingent liability shocks, such as large-scale bank recapitalization or financial system bailout to deal, for example, with a potential rise in NPLs from deleveraging. NPLs stand, it's not written here, but it stands for non-performing loans, meaning a loan that so shadow banking has risen in China, posing risks to the financial system. Chinese authorities have dismissed analysts' worries, insisting the country still has room to increase government debt. Note 93. Zhao Shao and Lisa Toroid. This is March 7, 2016. China's fiscal income too slow, but room for more government debt, finance minister, so reported by Reuters on March 2016. Former Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke earlier in 2016 commented that the debt pile facing China, an internal problem, given the majority of the borrowings was issued in local currency. Many economists have expressed the same views as Bernanke. The debt pile facing China is an internal problem given the majority of the borrowings was issued in local currency. The debt pile facing China is an internal problem given the majority of the borrowings were issued in local currency. Fair enough. Many economists have expressed the same views as Bernanke. Regulatory environment and tax system. Though China's economy has expanded rapidly, its regulatory environment has not kept pace. Since Deng Xiaoping's open market reforms, the growth of new businesses has outpaced the government's ability to regulate them. This has created a situation where businesses faced with mounting competition and poor oversight, take drastic measures to increase profit margins, often at the expense of consumer safety. This issue became more prominent in 2007, with a number of restrictions being placed on problematic Chinese exports by the United States. This issue became more prominent in 2007, with a number of restrictions being placed on problematic Chinese exports by the United States. This issue became more prominent in 2007, with a number of restrictions being placed on problematic Chinese exports by the United States. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, morning, noon, supporters, allies, this was a Coffee with Dragon special reading. The economy of China, calling for peaceful, cordial, harmonious relations with China.